Hello and welcome to episode 323 of Is a U-turn a U-turn, or just the government changing its mind, or is it a partial U-turn which makes it more of a J-turn? A subject we've discussed a lot on this podcast, and we're going to do it again, this time with Henry Zeffman. Hello, Henry.
Good morning, Adam. Good morning. Oh, gosh. It was good morning last time I was talking to you from this chair.
Yes. Also, Henry and I were both on 5 Live Breakfast this morning at about 5 to 7. And it's now 3:15 in the afternoon. Henry, what is your take on how you judge whether something is a U-turn or not? Because Chris and I have discussed many times before. In my mind, a U-turn has to be something that reverts you back to your original position, as opposed to sort of partially going ahead with something in a watered-down format.
I admire your stand for terminological coherence, but I think in political terms, a U-turn has probably become something a bit more nebulous than that. I see your point, though. I mean, I actually think it is an unhelpful phrase, because politicians might be willing to admit that they've changed their policy, but the phrase U-turn is so loaded that they get very anxious about admitting they've U-turned.
Because they're their peers and their colleagues, it's a mark of weakness, whereas the public maybe might view it as just doing the right thing.
I think issue by issue, that probably is how many members of the public feel. However, the risk for any government, and we're probably at this stage with this government, is that if you pile them up again and again, then it starts to look like a bigger story about the government.
This morning on 5 Live, I repeat, at 6:45 in the morning, we were discussing the number in the Times newspaper of government U-turns. They've totted it up to 13, but we both think that's a very generous interpretation of a U-turn that they're using there.
It's also a very generous memory of the question you asked me, Adam, because you actually said, "What's your number?" Which I was completely ambushed by. And then a bit of behind the curtain here, I sort of rapidly tried to change the subject and divert, like I was a politician being grilled by you. Anyway, we've done a bit. No, it's fine. It's fine. I'm not bitter. Just 9 hours on thinking about it. We've done a bit of work at our end. I mean, I don't think we've come up with a hard and fast BBC number. I think 13 is a bit unfair. There's things in there which I don't think are complete U-turns. For example, the income tax fandango in the run-up to the budget,
where they were going to put it up and then decided not to.
But it was never formal government policy that they were going to put up the rate of income tax. So I don't think that's a U-turn. I think that was a bit of an embarrassing episode, but it's different. But I think you can definitely pretty easily get to 9, I think, which are just unequivocally clear changes of government policy, whether they're J-turns or U-turns or whatever. And that feels like an awful lot for a government that is as new as this and has a majority as big as this government's.
And the 9th one on that list happened this week, and it is the government changing its position on what digital IDs are going to be used for. And we will discuss that U-turn, J-turn, change of position, you name it, in the second half of this episode of Newscast. Hello, it's Adam in the Newscast studio.
It's Henry in Westminster.
And the first subject we're going to discuss on Newscast today is the growing calls for the Chief of West Midlands Police, Craig Guilford, to stand down. This is over his handling of the ban on Israeli football fans of the club Maccabi Tel Aviv going to see a match against Aston Villa last year. It's become very controversial. He's under fire for, the decision to start with, and now he's coming under fire for his defence of the decision in front of MPs. We will untangle everything that's going on with the help of policing and home affairs correspondent, formerly of the BBC, Danny Shaw. Hi, Danny.
Hi, Adam.
Right. So, Danny, just before we dive into what's been happening today on Wednesday, and we're recording this episode of Newscast at about 3:30, just take us back to last year and just the reaction, first of all, to the decision by the local authorities in the West Midlands to ban these Israeli football fans. What actually went on there, and how did people feel about that decision at the time?
So this was a match that was going to take place in November between Aston Villa and Maccabi Tel Aviv. And in October, the Safety Advisory Group of Birmingham City Council, which is the group that really has to issue safety certificates for football matches, decided that they were going to ban all the Maccabi fans from attending that game. So there will be no tickets for supporters of the Israeli team going to that game. That's a pretty draconian step. I've been following football for years and obviously aware of issues and incidents over the years, but very, very unusual to ban away fans for a fixture. There was immediate sort of concern and condemnation of that decision. The Home Secretary, the Prime Minister said they disagreed with it, but it was a decision that was taken on the advice of the police, and I think the government's very keen not to get involved in operational policing decisions. And so there was a sense that there might be some kind of compromise reached, but in the end what happened was that Maccabi themselves actually declined to take the offer of tickets, and so they didn't send any fans. There was some protests at the match. There was a little bit of disorder, but not very much. And the match went ahead without any Maccabi fans. But the row has certainly escalated since then, with accusations that the police essentially took the wrong decision and were influenced politically and influenced by the views of sort of Muslim communities in Birmingham who were concerned about the presence of an Israeli team.
Yeah, very good summary, Danny. And I should say you're channeling your inner Laura Kay by speaking to us from a train station because you're on the move. So that's the train station sound effects you're hearing in the background there. Then Henry, the Chief Constable of West Midlands, Craig Guilford, he then appeared in front of MPs twice on the 1st of December and the 6th of January. And here is Craig Guilford, the Chief Constable, on the 6th of January, being asked by MPs whether his force had used artificial intelligence to compile their reports that led to them recommending that the Maccabi fans should be banned from the match.
There was a definite note that we've got to the bottom of in terms of the West Ham game. And I think the summation, I think in the House, it was a question that was asked in the House, was that, you've used AI, or West Midlands may have used AI on this particular occasion. We don't do that. We don't use the AI.
So yeah, Henry, just explain what we think was going on there, and what when he was making those statements to the MPs and the committee, and also what we've since learned about what the police had actually done to compile their information.
Yeah, that was Craig Guilford trying to explain to MPs how, as part of its deliberations, West Midlands Police had talked about the policing of a match between Maccabi Tel Aviv and West Ham, which never happened. And as you heard there, he claimed that it was the result of a Google search turning up something wrong rather than the use of AI, because he said they didn't use AI. Actually, this morning, in a letter to the Home Affairs Select Committee, which is separate to the other things which have developed today, Craig Guilford said that was wrong. They had actually used AI, in this case Microsoft Copilot, and this was essentially an AI hallucination. I mean, just more generally on Craig Guilford's 2 appearances before the Home Affairs Select Committee. And by the way, there were 2 because MPs were so unimpressed with the first one, and various things came out in the media after the first one which called into question things that he'd said at that hearing. I mean, I've watched, as you both have, Adam and Danny, so many hearings across so many different select committees over the years. I've never seen a group of MPs as unimpressed by the testimony of a witness as the MPs on the Home Affairs Select Committee visibly were with Craig Guilford. It really was quite something to see.
And Danny, just in terms of what we've learned today about the use of Microsoft Copilot, the AI function on all the Microsoft apps, I mean, what's your take on the fact that that's what the police were using to compile their evidence here?
Well, it's just extraordinary. I mean, first of all, what the police were doing was trying to research football matches in which Maccabi Tel Aviv have played. And the police intelligence unit, the National Police Intelligence Unit, sort of didn't provide them with enough information. So what we were told was that an officer had Googled to look for matches that are played in England, had come up with this game that West Ham had played against Maccabi, which was a complete fiction. They'd never played at all. Then when they were asked, well, was it Google or was it AI? I said, no, it was Googling. And then today, as you've heard, has to admit it was AI. It was Microsoft Copilot, which is an AI tool that had been used. I mean, it's embarrassing all round. It's embarrassing that the Police Intelligence Unit wasn't able to bottom that out. It's embarrassing that Google was used or said to be used. It's embarrassing that it's now come out that it was an AI tool. I mean, this is a police force. This is not someone, doing their GCSE sort of homework who might get something wrong. Bad as that is to rely on AI. It's a police force coming up with an intelligence report. I mean, for goodness sake. But that was only one of a number of problems and embarrassments which Shabana Mahmood today, the Home Secretary, having received an independent report about this, has described, as damning about the West Midlands Police's handling of all this, and quite right too.
And Henry, Shabana Mahmood did a ministerial statement to the House of Commons, which was just after Prime Minister's questions today. What did you make of what she said?
It was very strong, very strong. And there's sort of layers to this because Shabana Mahmood is the MP for a constituency in Birmingham. So she represents constituents who are policed by West Midlands Police and by Craig Guildford's leadership of that force. But she was extremely strong. I mean, she said that she no longer had confidence in Craig Guildford as the Chief Constable of West Midlands Police. She reckoned she was the first Home Secretary for 2 decades, so since David Blunkett in the New Labour years, to have said such a thing. Now, there's an interesting wrinkle to this, which is that the Conservatives, since that second appearance before the Home Affairs Select Committee by Craig Guildford, have been calling for the government to sack Craig Guildford. Shabana Mahmood is adamant that she does not have the power to do so. And I think, Danny will know better than me, but I think generally people agree with her interpretation of her powers rather than the Conservative interpretation of her powers. She says that since police and crime commissioners were introduced in the 2010s under the coalition, the Home Secretary no longer has that legal power. But as well as saying that she did not have confidence in Craig Guildford, essentially trying to shame him into resigning, she also said that the severity of this situation was such that it persuaded her that the government needed to give back to the Home Secretary that power. So that is something we will see the government change in the coming months, perhaps, or years, so that in future a Home Secretary will have the power to sack individual chief constables again. And that is quite a significant move as well, I think.
So, Danny, does that mean we're kind of at the moment in the hands of the West Midlands Police and Crime Commissioner, Simon Foster?
Yes, he is the only one that has the power to remove Craig Guildford, either by requiring him to retire or resign. I can't see Guildford surviving this. By the time this podcast airs, who knows, perhaps he will have fallen on his sword. But, when the Home Secretary stood up in the House of Commons and said she doesn't have confidence in you as the Chief Constable, I don't see what alternative you have other than to go. I mean, he might try and resist, he might try and tough it out, but ultimately, I think his days are numbered as a Chief Constable. Taking back the power of the Home Secretary, that is another sign that the Home Office is now stepping in much more. It moved away from interference in police forces under the Theresa May years when she was Home Secretary, and now it is very much stepping back in. We're going to see more of that, I think, with the police reform white paper in the next couple of weeks. So it's a considerable power that she's reintroducing, and I think Home Secretaries will have to use it carefully. She said she didn't expect to be using it very often, only where there were persistent and significant failings. Well, I think this would certainly qualify as a significant failing.
And police and crime commissioners are being abolished ultimately anyway, aren't they? That experiment is coming to an end.
Yes, that's right. The government's announced that there won't be any more PCCs when their time is up in a couple of years, but there will still be mayors for... Sorry, we're going to have to pause that.
No, this is great. I love a bit of... it's like making a radio drama. Quick, we need some really authentic sound effects to prove he's at a train station. Okay, so Danny, the fact is the experiment with police and crime commissioners is about to end.
Now, this will be the last batch of PCCs. They're going to be replaced by mayors in some areas and some kind of panel that will probably consist of local councillors in other areas. But it does give them an opportunity to obviously take back more control, the Home Secretary. But, all this is going to take some time, in the short term. I mean, this is about what happens in the West Midlands. I mean, the removal of a Chief Constable is a big step. And particularly someone like Craig Guildford, he's been in policing for over 30 years. He's extremely experienced. He's served in 5 police forces and the National Crime Squad. He's got the QPM, the Queen's Police Medal, which is the highest accolade in policing, a distinguished officer. But, sadly, he has to take responsibility for what's gone wrong here.
Danny, thank you very much. I'm going to let you carry on your journey. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Adam.
Henry, it's a shame Danny was only on a train to Lincolnshire, because actually if he'd been in the north, we could have talked about Northern Powerhouse Rail in real time. Another story that's cropped up today. I just wonder, though, there's so many potential ramifications politically for this. I can see two really obvious ones right now. One, the police's use of AI. Will this be something that people will want to scrutinise a bit more and start to think about, hang on, well, if they're using it for this purpose, what other purposes are they using it for? And second of all, Shabana Mahmood used that phrase confirmation bias when she was in the Commons earlier on. In other words, the police had a view about what they thought the truth was, and then they looked for the evidence to back that up. And I can imagine lots of communities in the UK would say, yes, that's their experience of the police too.
Right, totally. I mean, on each of those consecutively, one, on the use of AI, I think in response to an FOI as part of the sort of fallout from this over the past few months, West Midlands Police said they did not have a policy on AI. That was in response to somebody who was wondering, correctly as it turned out, whether AI had been used here. So police using AI without a policy on the appropriate ways to use AI in a matter like this seems very bad. I mean, clearly very bad, given they ended up claiming that a football match had taken place, which never took place. I think plenty of people would say actually they would expect the police to be making good, sensible use of AI, as so many workplaces are beginning to do. But still, that is certainly going to be an interesting theme, I think. Two, as you say, the retrofitting of evidence in order to fit a conclusion, which is essentially what the independent report today describes. Well, plenty of people will be saying, as you say, this isn't the only time this has happened. This perhaps isn't the only police force where that has happened. So I think that will be something that plenty of people will want to talk about. I'll just add a third, by the way, which is about the treatment of Jews in Britain in 2026. And that is a theme that Shabana Mahmood dwelled upon in her statement in the House of Commons. It is also a theme that various people who've been talking about this have drawn upon. Worth saying that Sir Andy Cook, in his report, said that he didn't find that anti-Semitism was a factor, or I think he said, there wasn't clear evidence that it was a factor in all of this. But nevertheless, that is absolutely part of the specific story here as well.
And I should say, Andy Cook is His Majesty's Inspector of Constabulary, who is the person who wrote the report that Shabana Mahmood, the Home Secretary, was responding to today, which has sparked all this news, along with the letter from West Midlands Police kind of fessing up about what they'd done. Oh, and also, Henry, just for people who aren't in our trade, FOI is a Freedom of Information request.
Did I
one
not
of the tools of our trade.
Sorry, very
don't
bad
worry,
of me.
it's fine. Now, Henry, back to our conversation we were having before the Newscast trademark opening titles about the government's latest change of position. Now it's digital ID cards. Give us the original pitch. And Keir Starmer did make it very clear what the original pitch was.
Yeah, he did. It was a policy designed to address a specific problem, first and foremost, and that was the specific problem of illegal immigration. And Keir Starmer said that everybody who wanted to work in the UK would have to have a mandatory new digital ID in order to prove their right to work in the UK. And he said, when he announced this in a speech back in September, let me spell that out. You will not be able to work in the United Kingdom if you do not have digital ID. It's as simple as that. Well, it turns out, Adam, it's not going to be as simple as that.
And what's the position now, as far as we understand it?
So the position now is that there will be some new mandatory right to work checks, but they won't be like what Keir Starmer described. So at the moment, there are various ways that you as an employee can prove that you have the right to work in the UK. They will essentially, from the sounds of things, remain the same. However, for the employer who is checking your right to work, there'll be a new digital element. That is very different to what the government policy was presented as in September. To be clear, government is still rolling out and planning to roll out a new digital ID by the end of this parliament. They believe that lots of people will want to take it up because it will become a much more convenient and easy way to access a whole range of public services than you currently have. And that may well be the case, and it may well be one of the big stories of the next few years. We may well come to see it as one of the most significant things that Keir Starmer's government initiated. However, it is pretty different to what Keir Starmer was talking about when he announced this mandatory digital ID in September.
In my head, I'm trying to dream up the sort of spreadsheet of options that would have been presented to ministers by the civil service when ministers said, oh, we want to go ahead with some kind of digital ID. What are our options? And I can imagine there was the hard option, which was make it mandatory for everybody. Basically, you get a letter in the post, like when you turn 16 and get your national insurance number, and say to everyone, here's your digital ID. Oh, and by the way, you'll have to use it if you want to access any government service. Then there's I was going to say semi-hard, which sounds a bit dodgy. The semi-hard option, which is, if you want to apply for a job and get the job, whether you're a migrant into the country or born here, you will need to show your digital ID. And then there would be the soft option, which we've got now, which is you roll out digital ID, people gradually adopt it when they feel like it, and it's one of the things you can use to prove your identity when you're getting a job. Oh, and by the way, Minister, the consequence of going for the softest option is it will take about 70 years for everyone in Britain to have a digital ID that they use regularly.
Yeah, that's probably right. And I think that's why you are right to question whether this is a sort of full U-turn which takes you back where you started, because this is not the government junking the introduction of digital ID. It is, though, a very different way of introducing it. And speaking to people in government last night, they believe that they are still going to get many of the benefits, but without what some in government came to see as just, frankly, conspiracy theories, rampant conspiracy theories about what their true motives were by wanting people to have digital ID. So they are trying, I think, to sort of take some of the sting out of this. Actually, behind this story is something quite important, which is that for years, really, when these arguments were playing out behind the scenes in the Labour Party and in different political parties about digital ID and whether it should be introduced by the British state, there were kind of two visions that sat slightly at tension about the purpose of digital ID. One was quite a narrow application to deal with illegal immigration, to make it harder to work here if you don't have the right to work here. And the other was a much sort of broader, more transformational thing about bringing public services into, well, not just into the 21st century, but deep into the 21st century. And there were different people in government, in this government, who had different reasons for supporting digital ID, which broadly fell into one of those two camps. But I come again to the crucial point. Keir Starmer, when he announced this policy, seemed to land himself in the first camp, measure to address illegal immigration. The government is now taking this in a completely different direction. It may well prove to be a slightly less unpopular direction, but it is a change of policy.
And here is how some of that played out at Prime Minister's Questions on Wednesday lunchtime when Keir Starmer was facing Kemi Badenoch, the Tory leader.
Mr. Speaker, can I welcome the Prime Minister's latest U-turn? I feel like I say that every week. Mandatory digital ID was a rubbish policy, and we on this side of the House are glad to see the back of it. Yeah. But yesterday, the Health Secretary said the Prime Minister's New Year's resolution should be, and I quote, to try to get it right first. To try to get it right first time. Try to get it right first time.
Mr. Speaker, on consistency, don't get me started on 5 Prime Ministers, 6 Chancellors, 8 Home Secretaries, 16 Housing Ministers. They had more positions in 14 years than the Kama Sutra. No wonder they're knackered and they left the country screwed.
Yeah, Henry, give us your diagnosis of how this played out in Parliament today.
Yeah, it was pretty awkward at PMQs. I mean, I don't want to sound like Mary Whitehouse, but I think if you're making a sex joke as Prime Minister in your first answer, you're not necessarily on the most solid argumentative ground. I think there's no getting away from this being a tricky issue for the government. But I think the bigger risk for the government is actually not about the policy itself. It stems from something that several Labour MPs I spoke to last night and this morning have raised, which is this feeling that they are fed up of defending the government on controversial policies, only to then have the rug pulled from under them by the Prime Minister when he rolls back on the policy. You know, there are loyal MPs who have defended the Prime Minister, often because they support the policy, but sometimes they don't support the policy, but they see the demands of collective responsibility as requiring them to defend the Prime Minister, defend the government's policies. They did it on winter fuel, they did it on welfare, they did it on plenty else besides, and then actually end up asking, well, why wasn't I just disloyal? Because the MPs who were disloyal ended up being able to sort of look good to their constituents or others who might have been complaining about it. I think that, in the short term, in Westminster, will be the most significant issue to come out of this row.
And actually, going back to our earlier conversation, the precise number of U-turns, J-turns, whatever, isn't necessarily the problem. It's just the fact that there have been too many for too many people.
Yeah, exactly. And also, I think they're particularly a problem for Keir Starmer because they fuel something that has long been a criticism of him, right back to when his political fortunes were much stronger than they are now, which is that he doesn't necessarily have a deep inner sense of what he believes. And, you know, if you were a strong prime minister whose MPs felt like you had a clear sense of vision and mission, you can get away on a few issues with saying, look, I'm going to have to give ground here, I'm going to have to change policy here, but you know that the direction of travel is exactly the same as it's always been with me. But with Keir Starmer, I hear again and again from Labour MPs that what they crave from him is a sense of where he's taking them and where he's taking the country. And I still think the big task for him in 2026, I thought this at the start of 2026, and I think we'll be saying this right through, certainly to the May elections, is can he provide that vision to Labour MPs and to the country? If he can, I think a lot of his political problems will start to melt away. But if he can't, I think he's going to be in pretty big trouble.
And Henry, I will now let you melt away after a very long, hard day's work and some excellent analysis. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Adam. Will I be speaking to you first thing tomorrow as well?
No, this was a one-off.
Oh, it was a one-off.
Special guest appearance this week.
Cool.